Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm 19 years old and I currently live in Switzerland. Um, this is my first video that I post on the subject um, because a few months ago I was diagnosed with a dissociative disorder, um, which which I was told was most likely DID. Um, I would just like to talk about how I got there and what led me to go to therapy for it. And I will just share my journey with it and hopefully um, be able to fight some of the misinformation that is out there. And yeah, so I would say let's get into it. I started showing symptoms of dissociative disorder really when I was about 13. My family had moved from Italy to Switzerland, and I started getting panic attacks. And after the panic attacks were resolved, I wanted to go back to school, but I started getting symptoms that were concerning. I would get severe gastrointestinal reactions that led me to be out of school for a few months, and eventually I was discharged and I was told it was all psychosomatic, so it was attributed to stress. Soon after, I started developing these severe dissociative episodes that were diagnosed as brought on by anxiety, where I would be walking to school, and at the time I was 14 now. I would be walking to school and then my legs would suddenly stop working. They would just become stiff and I would be unable to move them. If I tried to move them, they just wouldn't. It felt like they were stuck to the ground, and this would last up to hours, and eventually my mom would have to come pick me up and bring me home. I couldn't go in either direction, so it wasn't just a refusal to go to school, it was in both directions. Eventually it came to a head when I wanted to go to school one day but couldn't, and as I went out the door I eventually found myself sitting at my table having a back and forth conversation with what I called my brain on written paper. And the conversation my mother has kept goes something like, let me go to school, and then my brain answering, no, it's too dangerous, I won't let you. That kept going for, I think it was 45 minutes, until eventually my brain said that it had control over me and I couldn't fight against it. And that was it. I had to stay home, and my therapist never really brought it up again. Unfortunately, during that time was when DID became really, really trendy online, and I had online friends at the time on Discord, and I brought it up to them because they knew what was going on in my life. And one of them was really into the whole Discord DID trend, and I started getting down the rabbit hole of DID, which was really unhealthy. I started malingering and unconsciously creating alters that I didn't really have, and for 2 years I stayed in that rabbit hole while still experiencing my normal symptoms. So I would still have these moments where I didn't know who I was, or my age would feel weird and I would lose time that I didn't remember losing. I would agree to doing things that I just didn't remember agreeing to do, or it just felt wrong. My entire existence felt wrong. And then the most confusing time of my life started, where I began identifying as male. And I didn't know why, because sometimes I felt just fine being me, but other times I would just feel like I felt like I was a guest in my own body, and like it didn't really belong to me. And it felt like there was this male presence in it that would take over and just make decisions instead of me. That led me to cut my hair really short. My wardrobe at the time was filled with mostly male clothes. And I almost started hormone replacement therapy because I was 17 at the time. Eventually, I'm not sure what caused it to stop, but one day in therapy, my therapist brought up, I think you might have DID. And I just remembered that I suddenly woke up as myself, and I had this sort of real clarity moment, and I was terrified. And I left the therapy session, and I can't remember anything of that, but after that, I talked to my therapist, and we decided that it was best to ignore those symptoms because we agreed that a big part of it was being malingered. And I didn't know at this point what was real and what wasn't because so much of it had been influenced by all this community on Discord that promoted separation and just this very much anti-recovery agenda. Yeah, so for about a year I completely ignored all of my symptoms. I still had all of them. I still blacked out. I would find these drawings that I didn't remember making. There were some very violent drawings. My handwriting would seemingly shift with no reason. Not just like the style of handwriting, but the handwriting itself, the way my hand would move. I would get all of these psychosomatic symptoms that made no sense. Chronic migraines I started getting for a long period of time. Then it was nausea. I've had trouble swallowing for the past 5 years. The dizziness, and then panic attacks. I started having these really, really, really horrendous panic attacks. They were so bad, I used to get up to 3 hours long panic attacks multiple times a day. It got to a point where I was bedbound, I wasn't eating, I wasn't doing anything. And I was finally put on an antidepressant which helped the panic attacks. And I still had the identity confusion. I would sometimes suddenly realize that it was 2024 and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how it had gotten to 2024 because in my experience it was still 2018. I would get these terrible intrusive feelings that something horrible was happening to me just while I was watching TV. I would have these images in my head of past events that would not leave me alone, and I didn't know what it was because I had previously been pseudo-diagnosed with PTSD as I first started therapy, but I had to change therapist because insurance wouldn't cover it. So I had to switch therapists, and the PTSD diagnosis was then ignored. And so that brought me to the summer of 2024. I got in my first relationship, and it was really weird. I kept oscillating, my feelings kept oscillating, not in a healthy way, I think, but more of a I like him, no I don't like him, and my opinions would constantly shift, which has been an issue with me ever since I was a child. My opinions seem to be completely very fragile. I have one opinion one day, and then the next day I will have a completely different opinion. And it could be anything. It could be politics, it could be morals, even what I want to do with my life. And I'm not talking about like frivolous dreams of, oh, I want to become a superstar. I'm talking about one day I want to be a doctor and study medicine, and the next day I'm really into house designing. And these interests keep going back and forth with no apparent pattern. And I really hate house designing. I really do. I really, really do. So it would make no sense to me. The same as my political views changing, which I will not share. But my political views would go to the extremes, and I wouldn't know why, because I feel like my own view is fairly stable, but then the next day I would think something completely different. My emotions were all over the place. I would feel happy, and then all of a sudden I would feel this complete terror that would last like 5 minutes, and then it would be gone and I would be completely happy again. And it just felt most of the time like I was walking through fog, like my body wasn't really mine. And eventually I had to leave my ex-boyfriend because of actions on his side that were non-consensual. And for a few months I have no clear memory, but eventually in November I met my current boyfriend, and as we started dating I started noticing that I was feeling very detached from reality. Like I was constantly walking in a sort of dreamlike state. And I come from an extremely toxic family environment, which I won't go into detail about, but when I went to my boyfriend's house for the first time and I witnessed how sweet his family was, I broke down, and all of these really intense traumatic memories from my childhood started popping up, and they've never stopped since. And after a month or so of dating, my boyfriend eventually brought up the question, "Do you remember us fighting?" And I said no, because I didn't think we'd ever fought. And it turned out that we had been fighting very often and very aggressively. I would accuse him of things that I had never even thought of. I would go completely catatonic. I would be drooling on the floor. It would be a very, very bad situation, and I would have no recollection of it. My voice would change, my demeanor would change, and my overall behavior would be completely different, unrecognizable, and no one knew why. I tried to tell my therapist, but she insisted it was all anxiety about the new relationship. And eventually I moved out of my parents' house because I couldn't deal with them anymore. And as I moved into my own apartment, the symptoms started getting so bad and out of hand. I eventually broke down on the kitchen floor one evening because I felt like there was a parasite inside of me, and this voice was belittling me, telling me insults, and eventually he took over my body and he started ripping paper apart, and he started being very aggressive, and I couldn't do anything about it. I only saw I saw my own body doing things that I didn't want it to do, and I just broke down on the kitchen floor and I called my psychiatrist in tears because I didn't know what was happening to me. She gave me an appointment, and I went, and she put me on antipsychotics, which caused a really bad reaction, which I won't get into, but please check your side effects before taking the medication. And I ended up in the hospital because of that as well. And soon after, I was at my boyfriend's house, and I woke up one morning unable to walk. And I was brought into the ER multiple times. No one could find anything wrong with me until eventually I disclosed the fact that I had been in therapy for suspected DID, and they looked at me with their eyes wide open and said, "That explains it. You have conversion disorder." So I was diagnosed with conversion disorder. I was given a wheelchair and crutches, and I was sent home. And now it's been about 2 months, and I still can't walk properly. and I still haven't gotten any specialized therapy because waiting lists are months long. I have a planned inpatient stay for an official assessment and diagnosis of DID, and for trauma therapy, but I don't have any more information currently. But yeah, that's just my story, and unfortunately I wish I could go into more detail about specific events, but I just don't have the knowledge of them. I wish I could tell you what went on from 2020 to 2023 when I felt like a male, but I don't know anything. I know I was hospitalized for 3 months at one point, for severe OCD that was eventually diagnosed, but I don't have the information. I unfortunately don't, but I can tell you that to this day, even after I've got the current temporary diagnosis, but even after I'll get the official one, it is nothing like social media portrays it to be. I don't have friends in my head that keep me company. It doesn't feel like I'm not alone. I feel more alone, and it's not a superpower. It's not something that I enjoy. Sure, it can have its funny moments. I guess, like, I actually can't think of anything, but I guess it could have its funny moments. But in general, it's a nightmare. Having panic attacks because you hear birds chirping, that's not a superpower. Forgetting that you're in a relationship and reading messages that parts of you send who insult the person you're with, the person you love, that's not a superpower. And I wish I could just say, hey, part of me, can you just come out and deal with this, because I can't. That doesn't work. I've had to deal with some really hurtful shit on my own, and I begged and begged and begged for another part to take over, but it's not on request. I can't talk to them. I can't make funny jokes with them. Most of them aren't aware I exist, and if they are, they just consider me a stranger. It's a constant stream of self-sabotage. I try and go to school and they stop me from it. They hate my relationship, they hate my body. I don't think I have any clothes that are more revealing than a t-shirt. I have this constant sense of shame around everything that regards me. I feel like I'm gonna be abandoned every other second. And I know that these are heavy topics, but these are topics that no one talks about. And they are a big part of what DID is. DID is not about the alters at all. I would say that the least of my problems is the alters. My parts are... It's terrifying to lose time. It's terrifying not to have control over yourself. But it's even more terrifying what's happening when you are yourself, but you don't know who you are. It's more terrifying to know you are you, but not know who you are. I know that I am me, but who is me? That's the thing. The terrifying part of DID is not as much the parts as it is everything that the dissociation brings on. The memories, the fact that trauma memories gets overimposed over true memories. So if I'm having a fight with my boyfriend, I will suddenly stop seeing my boyfriend. I won't be able to see my boyfriend, and he will look like a complete stranger or like somebody who hurt me in the past. It's not about the alters, and sure, that's the most characteristic symptom of DID, because if you don't have the alters, you don't have DID, but at the same time, the alters are a symptom. They are not the disorder. And I guess I wish that there was more of the disorder out there, because, as I said, this is not having friends in my head. I would argue that they are more like enemies in my head. I'm sure they're all trying to protect me in their way, and I'm sure that they all think they're doing their best, but it doesn't always feel like it, to be honest. When you wake up and you come to and you realize that you have 5 cuts on your legs that you don't remember how you got them, when you come to and you realize you've self-harmed but didn't, but you must have because you're home alone, that's not fun. Or when you have the urge to do something that you think is wrong, but you have to do it anyway because that's what you feel like you are. Or when you lose your ability to speak because a part is so traumatized that they have lost their ability to speak, and so you do as well. It's not about having a funny world you can go in and hang out with them in. I don't have what people call an inner world. I have visualization techniques that have been taught to me to calm myself down over my various hospital stays, but I don't have an inner world. I don't have a castle where all my parts magically meet up. When I'm anxious, I just visualize myself in the woods, just building myself a little hut. That's it. And I really just wish that there was more of this information out there, because it's really not an altered disorder, it's a trauma disorder. It's a dissociative disorder. And I guess that what I'm hoping for by making this is that someone out there who does have the same issues as I do, who does look for the less sensationalized parts of the disorder, sees this and knows they are not alone. And I also hope that me making this will 5-10 years down the line be a good reminder to myself to see just how badly I was doing in the past and how hopefully I will have improved in the future. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.